Joining us on the line right now, he is the owner, operator, and basically everything of Championship Melt and Beyond Wrestling. Drew Cordeiro is joining Jerome and myself on the line. Drew, man, how are you even alive right now after this weekend?
Oh man, you know what? Here's the thing is I do a lot of work ahead of time, and then the day of the event, I'm just like, whatever happens, happens. And I sit back and I try and put out as many fires as possible. And then I always say, okay, Monday's the day I'm going to get caught up on everything. And I always have so much extra work left over from Sunday that by the time Monday rolls around, I'm still basically like one foot in the grave and just trying to push through. And then I got to take a nice nap today, so I'm caught up. I'm all right.
Well, Drew, so you have, let's talk about this past weekend. The iPay-per-view you debuted. As far as I've heard, I haven't watched it. Jerome watched it. Kevin is going to be reviewing it, but I've heard nothing bad about it. How was that experience? I mean, because you've always kind of, honestly, been kind of against doing iPay-per-view, like live. So how was the experience?
Oh, I mean, it was more so I was excited to do a doubleheader with Evolve Wrestling. I thought timing wise with their involvement with WWE and the Cruiserweight Classic, you know what I mean. If they were going to be coming up to the Boston area, it'd be worth it to try and work with them. Um, Obviously, I think that they have a lot to offer in terms of exposure on a international, worldwide, online basis. I think as it stands right now, Beyond Wrestling probably has a stronger foothold in New England wrestling. So it seemed like a worthwhile endeavor to partner up. And it was just kind of like, well, if we're going to do the show together, you know, the Beyond Wrestling portion has to be an iPay-per-view. So there wasn't really much discussion about it, and I can't believe that the iPay-per-view, after all these years, is actually a viable platform, considering how bad it was in the initial days when people were trying to first run iPay-per-views and the technology kind of didn't match the ideas. Because in theory, being able to reach a worldwide audience with a live show and being able to produce it in-house, that's an awesome idea, and you'd be able to reach many more fans that way. But, I mean, it seemed like there were problem after problem with Go Fight Live, and um, I'm happy to say that WWE Live, I mean, has a proven track record that they have been able to basically turn it around. And Gabe, Sal, and Trevin are the leaders in terms of internet pay per view broadcasts right now with WWN. And from what I understand, there was virtually no issues with our stream, and that was always the big concern. It wasn't as though I was against the format per se, because I think it's cool to be able to show. The world what you can do live. It's always more exciting watching wrestling when you don't know the result. But the concern was always, well, what happens from a technical perspective if this doesn't work? Thankfully, we didn't have to cross that bridge today.
Is there any idea of maybe doing more pay per view, or was this just kind of because you were partnering up with WN Live for the weekend and that's it?
Yeah, I don't think it's something that we would do without WWN Live at this point. We're actually going to be working with Evolve again, going back to the Melrose Memorial Hall on Sunday, December 11th. So I would imagine that that's going to be another iPay per view as well. But aside from that, I mean, there's been times that I've off with live streams, but just the amount of work. That's the thing that's incredible. Is like when Beyond Wrestling has a live event, I've got like one person to run the door, one person to run merchandise. My family usually comes to do concessions, and you might have like a couple extra bodies. And with WWN Live, they have like a staff of like 40 or 50 people. And there's so much equipment that needs to be transported and set up. It is of a scale that, to me, I don't think that it's something that I would be able to do on my own. Not at this point in Beyond Wrestling, because it would require me to hire and outsource so many different responsibilities, and it's just not something that I'm interested in at this point. Maybe doing something more along the lines of what Freelance has done, where it's a single camera kind of live stream, more directed through YouTube, specifically Beyond Demand, to try and create some premium content. I could see us looking into that. I mean, obviously, now that we did the first iPay-per-view, and it seems like it was pretty well received, we've had multiple requests for Americanrana to be broadcast on iPay-per-view. It's just too short notice, you know what I mean? We're less than 2 weeks away from Americanrana 16, so that's not going to be viable. But it's definitely something to keep in mind. I'm a lot more open to discussing the possibility of doing future iPay reviews for Beyond Wrestling than I was prior to this weekend. So overall, I was very happy with the experience.
Jerome, you watched the show live. Anything that you want to say about some of the matches, some favorite stuff? I mean, Drew's right there, so.
I said a lot of stuff earlier. It was mostly complimentary. I thought the show was good in that it represented sort of beyond the full range of Beyond Wrestling, showcasing some of the local talents. You know, your EYFBOs and Jakas, your guys who maybe are not as familiar to indie audiences. You also got the Women's Revolution, whatever, WWR. You got a showcase match for them, and you had Tommaso Ciampa, Matt Riddle, two guys who are very well known now to indie fans. So, I assume that is what you were going for with this iPay-per-view, is you wanted a good mix of, here are some of New England's best, here are some indie wrestlers you probably know, and here are some female talents that also deserve more of an opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I looked at it as this is going to be Beyond Wrestling's introduction to a new audience as opposed to putting together a show for our existing fans. And, timing-wise, unfortunately, I had been going back and forth about the possibility of running mid-July, and initially it fell through. It looked like it was going to be easier for their schedule to do Friday, Saturday, and they were originally scheduled for Wakefield, which unfortunately that ended up falling through in there, and because there were concerns that once they locked in the building and the building kind of saw the scale of Evolve, that the building's capacity wasn't going to be enough. So there were issues with them being over capacity, and then, issues with the fire marshal. So it ended up being more beneficial for them to switch over to doing the doubleheader on Sunday in Melrose. At that point, I had already had our June 26th event announced and our July 31st event. So to throw together, what basically needed to be one of the biggest live events that we've ever run, running 3 shows of that magnitude in 5 weeks, coming off of a sold-out show in Somerville, Massachusetts, which is only about maybe 15, 20 minutes from Melrose, only 3 weeks prior. It wasn't ideal circumstances. So if you're a fan of Beyond Wrestling, I think that you're used to 10 to 12 match cards that go 4.5 hours. And so to see a card that was filled mostly with rematches might not be as appealing, and it might be the type of thing where it's like, you know what, I just went to the show, I'm going to wait until Americanrana. With the Americanrana lineup is obviously bringing in a lot more outside talent. So instead, I wanted to make sure that the iPay-per-view was put together in a way that we could basically put all of our best wrestlers on one show in a surefire situation where, by doing so many rematches, it's like, well, we knew Tommaso Ciampa and Matthew Riddle had an unbelievable match the first time they wrestled. Let's do it again. Zack Sabre Jr. and Jonathan Gresham, incredible. We're able to put together a series of matches with them. EYFBO and the Hit Squad, unbelievable chemistry. JT Dunn and Kimberly always have had great matches, never in front of a live crowd before. Dickinson and Pinky, I think we've only run it at a studio taping, but obviously they had unbelievable contests at Interspecies Wrestling, and then with the Women's Wrestling Revolution Showcase, it's like, if you're going to go forward with a 6-match card, you want to make sure that all of those matches get an appropriate amount of time, which, typically, again, we run more matches that go a little bit shorter. So I almost put this show together maybe somewhat mimicking the format of like an NXT live special, where we're going to reduce the number of matches that we normally have, but we're going to make sure everybody gets the proper amount of time. We're going to make sure that every match has something different to offer. So in that regard, I felt Sunday went about as good as it could have gone. And, I wasn't thrilled with the turnout. I mean, the building capacity is somewhere in the range of like 650. And I know that going back in December, we probably won't have a Boston area show in November. So I'm going to be interested to see how many more fans we can bring to the building for December when it is our big show of the month, as opposed to just kind of getting thrown out there somewhat last minute.
So do you think because you ran at 1:30 in the afternoon or 2:30 in the afternoon, do you think that had any sort of an effect on it?
No, because we usually do Sunday afternoons anyway. I mean, we've had start times between 2 o'clock and 6 o'clock, and I don't really think that the 4-hour difference. You know what I mean? It's either a Sunday afternoon or it's not. So I think if anything, working with Evolve Wrestling, there were a lot of fans that have never bought tickets to a Beyond Wrestling event that were pre-ordering tickets to our show. Just going through the email addresses and saying, okay, I know that this is a new fan, and I know that this is because we're working with Evolve Wrestling. So hopefully those people liked what they saw that day, and hopefully it's going to be the type of situation where they're going to be willing to make the drive down for Americanrana 16 in Providence to continue to check out, see what Beyond Wrestling has to offer. I would say of all of the events that we've done in the last year, the doubleheader with Evolve was probably the most successful in terms of capturing as many new fans in as short of a period of time as possible. Between the iPay-per-view, since a lot of people were making a day out of it by watching both streams, and then also by fans that were going to go to Evolve to see guys like Drew Galloway that have never really competed in the area, but figured they would make a day out of it and came for Beyond Wrestling as well.
Is
Go
it?
ahead, Chris.
Yeah. I was gonna ask. So, have you? You have the streaming service at Beyond Demand. Everyone should go check that out on YouTube. YouTube a very stable platform. I check out your subscription service and I just stream it to my television either with the Chromecast or even just straight from my phone, just because I'm able to do that. Have you seen, I guess, a growth of new fans from that as well? I mean, obviously, doing new live events at different venues is important, but having a streaming service that has to open up a lot of different international fans to you.
Yes and no. The biggest limitation of the YouTube streaming service versus Pivot Share is that you have to actually create an offer for every country that you want the service to be available, and it's not available in every country. So I think that I think there's like a list of like 45 to 60 countries that I can choose from. So, you'll get people randomly like, oh, I'm from Germany. For some reason, the service isn't available in Germany. What can I do to watch it? And so that kind of stinks. But overall, when we first started Beyond Demand, what my initial goal in my head was, we were able to reach within a week, and that was what I thought that we were going to do long term. We're more than 3 times bigger than that right now, and what I'm trying to concentrate on is we're running a very aggressive schedule this summer. We did 2 shows in May, 2 shows in June. We're gonna have 2 shows in July, possibly shows in August. Not sure yet for September. Going to kind of see how things go at FET. And then, we'll figure out the schedule for the rest of the year from there. But we're doing our monthly big event, which is getting a proper release through SmartMark Video, DVD, MP4. And then, for instance, like when we did the collaborative show with House of Glory back in June, we videotaped it on our end. They taped it on their end. They released it on DVD, but we made that a Beyond Demand exclusive. Same thing's going to happen with the Flash iPay-per-view, is that WWN can release their edit on their end. Our final edit is going to be released exclusively at Beyond Demand. That's not going to get a DVD release. The Greatest Rivals Round Robin that we're going to do with Team Pazuzu in August, it's going to be a bit of a different format anyway, since it's going to be at a outdoor festival, but that's going to be exclusive to Beyond Demand. So all of that's going to come in addition to shows like Ripped Off in the Prime of Life or Americanrana 16, or going back to May, C5, which we taped earlier in the day, was exclusive to Beyond Demand, and then Gigantic got the full DVD release. So it's allowing us to experiment with different formats. I will say this, the biggest boost that I saw to Beyond Demand in terms of picking up the most subscribers after a single release was after the debut of Women's Wrestling Revolution. I think with that show alone, we picked up over 50 paid subscribers. So that ended up being a big addition to the channel. And that's something that I'm looking forward to, obviously, since we're going to be doing the doubleheader at FET Music with Women's Wrestling Revolution, a show called Revolutionary, and Beyond Wrestling Americanrana 16, both on July 31st at FET Music in Providence.
Yeah, speaking of, so you have at Americanrana, or actually right before it, you have another Women's Wrestling Revolution show, Revolutionary, 1:30 p.m. The doors opening at FET Music. Kind of a cool little lineup here. Gianna Perrazzo, Kimber Lee, Santana Guerrero versus Barbie Hayden, Jessica Havoc versus Veda Scott, Chelsea Green versus Lufisto, Taylor Hendricks versus Sonya Strong. This is understandably you're just booking this, right? This isn't necessarily your thing per se.
I mean, based on the execution of the first show, I'm definitely doing a lot more for the second show, but ultimately, yes, that's my primary role within the organization as matchmaker. But I'm also, as part of my agreement with Fet Music Management, I also got access to the footage. So that's allowing me to kind of promote. I mean, if you're a venue and you have a show coming up and you're promoting it, you're going to put tickets on the website, you're going to hand flyers out. So I'm doing a lot more to promote the second show because I have access to the footage from the first show. And we actually did the full DVD release, Blu-ray, video on demand, and MP4 through SmartMark Video. And at YouTube.com/WWR Pro Wrestling, we're actually releasing the entire first show for free, match by match. So we're about halfway through that. And then we've been taping Women's Wrestling Revolution spotlight matches at Beyond Wrestling live events. So we've got a couple that we've yet to release, including Sonya Strong versus Lufisto, which we taped at House of Glory versus Beyond Wrestling, and Taylor Hendricks versus Jordan Grace, which we taped at Ripped Off in the Prime of Life in Somerville back at the end of June. So, I'm pretty happy with the card, the way that it came together for the second show. There was a bit of a situation because the Women's Wrestling Revolution show was originally scheduled for the night before. So the format for Americanrana initially was we were going to see if RWA, which runs out of the RWA Chop Shop. They also do live events from time to time. JT Dunn's got a lot more influence in that organization, and obviously he runs the school at RWA. We were looking to initially doing a Saturday afternoon RWA show at Fet Music, Women's Wrestling Revolution show Saturday night. We were going to do a double card for Americanrana 16, which was going to feature a lot more local wrestlers for the initial show. And unfortunately, what ended up happening is Fet Music, I don't know, let's say they got double booked for the Saturday. I'm not entirely sure of the specifics, but unfortunately, they weren't going to be able to run the women's show. So it was either, okay, do we cancel the Women's Wrestling Revolution show just after one show, or can we look to reschedule it for Sunday afternoon, and instead of making a full weekend, because obviously there's a lot of fans that are within driving distance, but I think the goal for an event like Americanrana is to try and make Providence a destination for professional wrestling for the weekend, to try and attract as many fans as possible that are from out of the area that are going to be willing to drive in, maybe stay at a hotel for the night, something more than just a day trip. Unfortunately, that didn't come to fruition. And so, there's a lot of people that I wanted to work with at Americanrana that, unfortunately aren't going to get that opportunity. And it wasn't an easy decision to make. And, I feel bad for some of the wrestlers that have been, working very hard over the past couple of years to not be able to get a spot on the biggest show that we have. But it's kind of one of those things where my hands are tied, and I feel like this is the best direction to go in. I really do believe that the Women's Wrestling Revolution brand is something worth sacrificing for, and I do see a lot of growth. I thought that where we started with it was an excellent start and put us ahead. Like, I remember for what we did for WSU's first show, and the Women's Wrestling Revolution debut was almost triple that. So that, to me, that's a really good starting point. And obviously, I've invested a lot of time and energy trying to build the brand in between the live events by spotlighting it on Beyond Wrestling. It's a priority for me. So I think the lineup is pretty cool. Unfortunately, we're just finding out of a couple cancellations as we're getting closer to the show. Chelsea Green, she's not going to be wrestling. Lufisto, no, I guess she's having some visa issues that have to get sorted out since she did get hired by TNA. So she's not going to be able to make it to the show. And then Willow Nightingale, who I thought did awesome on the first show. A bit of an unknown. I think she trained with NYWC, really just starting to get out there. She thought she had like a sprained knee, and I think it got misdiagnosed, and then it ended up that she ended up having a torn meniscus, so she had to have surgery today. So she's going to be on the shelf for a while. So couple matches that need to get shuffled around that I need to figure out. But I mean, Deonna Purrazzo, who is like everywhere in terms of women's wrestling, like I don't think there's anybody that keeps a busier schedule. She's actually never wrestled Kimberly before, and Kimberly, is one of the most popular competitors in Beyond Wrestling, and I think that popularity definitely transcends and is certainly going to work to her benefit at the Women's Wrestling Revolution show. Santana Garrett and Barbie Hayden, they had an awesome match when I was running WSU, and I'd like to think that we could repeat that success, if not better, since both wrestlers have gotten better as they picked up more experience. Veda Scott versus Jessica Havoc. Veda likes to run her mouth. Jessica Havoc likes to punch people in the mouth. That's an easy one. So, and then Sonya Strong, who, trained with Amazing Red, coming out of House of Glory. Like, I think that she's somebody that you really need to keep an eye out for. And Taylor Hendricks, now that she's back in the New England area, I think is somebody we're going to be seeing a lot more out of too. So, pretty cool lineup. Cool mix of some wrestlers that you don't normally see kind of like rolling in the same promotions. But that's you guys know how I book by now. I like to put together matches that nobody else does, first and foremost. So, it's coming together nicely, and so far the advance is a lot stronger than what it was for the first show. So again, I am seeing growth with the Women's Wrestling Revolution project.
I think that's really great. Obviously, you talked to some of, I believe, Sierra and Dave. I think Jen also about it, and so they'll have you back on their women's podcast pretty soon to talk about all that stuff going on. But yeah, speaking of, Americanrana 2016 is happening. An interesting lineup. I like it. I think that it kind of encapsulates a lot of the uniqueness of Beyond Wrestling. For example, to determine the ace of Beyond Wrestling, you have JT Dunn, Donovan Dijak, and Chris Dickinson. A lot of people ask us this, and obviously you probably get it multiple fold. There is no championship in Beyond Wrestling. So it's really just about these guys who have had really good years with you. You're booking them in a lot of different ways than other promotions. And now you have them all facing each other in a three-way. And then you have the Skillogy Part 3, Zack Sabre Jr. and Jonathan Gresham. And God knows when, if things continue the way they are, when we'll see those kinds of matches again between those two. And then Chris Hero versus Kimberly, which, really, this is the first time ever. I don't know. I'd have to go through CageMatch.net or something, but that's pretty crazy. And then you have Catch Point of TJ Perkins, Drew Gulak, Tracy Williams versus Team Pazuzu, of Jaka, Drastic, and Ortiz, Tommaso Ciampa versus Brian Fury, and a Battle of New England. Johnny Gargano versus David Starr, the 1 year in the making. And then this match, I'm sure, makes Kevin Ford very happy. Brian Cage versus Keith Lee. AR Fox versus Matt Tremont, Matt Riddle versus John Silver, and then a 10-man tag team match, which I think is kind of, at this point, the favorite kind of opening for all the Americanranas. So, Drew, a really fun lineup. And like I said, it shows that uniqueness up and down the card.
At first, when I wanted to put together the Americanrana match, this card this year, there were certain matches that I kind of had tunnel vision about. And, the closer and closer that we got, the negotiation process with wrestlers that I never really dealt with before, it was just kind of like, what am I doing? Like, there's people that have been busting their ass for Beyond Wrestling that are probably more deserving of the spot than just bringing in somebody once in hopes that it would create enough buzz. And I'm happier with the way the lineup turned out. You gotta find that balance. You know what I mean? Like, when you look at a company like AIW and the lineup that they put together for like the JT Lightning tournament, where it's kind of like all over the place. And you know what? I think that AIW in that regard has really found that niche where they can be the independent wrestling promotion that still has that super indie style match, but they can bring in former WWE guys, and it's not gimmicky the same way it is for a company like PWS, if that makes sense. And then you have a company like AAW that is starting to book more like PWG with less focus on some of the local wrestlers and more focus on, some of the best internationally known wrestlers. And it's like, man, it really seemed like things turned around for them when they started booking the AAA wrestlers that compete for Lucha Underground. So it's like, then I was like, okay, well, I kind of want to reach out to those guys. And obviously when you look at PWG and how they've booked, and it's like, okay, there's a lot more influence from the British scene. Guys that have gotten, more visibility with companies like Rev Pro and Progress. And then I was just like, wait a minute, like, that's what all of those companies do really well. And it's cool to borrow elements of those organizations from time to time. But ultimately, like, I think Beyond Wrestling is about focusing on wrestlers that live in the United States that are just as good as the wrestlers from Mexico or Japan or England, and putting them in a situation where they can succeed. And I'll tell you right now, this year, John Silver has caught on like wildfire in Beyond Wrestling. He told me he said, I know I can offer a lot more than what you already have me doing. And when a wrestler comes up to me with that kind of confidence, I feel like I have no choice but to put them in that position where it's either sink or swim. And that first match that he had with Leo Rush was incredible. And then he had an unbelievable match with Tommaso Ciampa. And then the match that he just had with Keith Lee. And that's the other guy that's been on fire. Is like Keith Lee came out of nowhere, and it's unbelievable that a wrestler that large can stay hidden for so long. But there's so many incredibly talented wrestlers in the United States, and that's really what I want to do with Beyond Wrestling. That's going to be different than any of those other organizations. I still want Beyond Wrestling to be that platform to give these undiscovered or overlooked wrestlers an opportunity to show just how good they are and break out at Beyond Wrestling and get popular enough where somebody like a PWG or an AAW is going to be willing to fly them to their corner of the country so that way they can compete in front of that audience. And that was kind of my goal ultimately once I kind of moved past what my original plans were for Americanrana, to put the spotlight on honestly, I mean, like guys like David Starr, Keith Lee, AR Fox, John Silver, Matt Riddle, Pazuzu. I mean, anybody that's been following Beyond Wrestling this year, it's like the change in attitude from EYFBO and Jaka. Like, they are the most popular wrestlers on the show. Every time they come out, it's like a deafening reaction. So, I'm really, really, really happy with the way the lineup ended up coming together.
Is there? I mean, so this is the kind of booking that you do. You talk about AAW kind of doing some of those Super Show matches, and I know that I think during a Q&A on Twitter at twitter.com/Beyond Wrestling, you did reach out to some of the Lucha Underground guys, and it just the booking didn't work out, right? Because I'm sure a lot of our listeners are saying, why aren't the Lucha Underground guys?
Yeah,
there?
they weren't available that day, and the AAA office offered me some other guys in exchange. Ranging from King Cuerno, which he's cool, but obviously he's not featured the same way that somebody like Pentagon Jr. is. And like, even though I feel like he could probably produce a match that's just as good, you also have to look at it if you're getting a flight from Mexico, what that price tag is, how many fans is that wrestler going to draw in? And bottom line, King Cuerno is not as popular as Pentagon. So you had the option for somebody like King Cuerno to like somebody named like Grundo. I don't know who that is, or Grando. I'm not sure. You know what I mean? So it's like, if you're looking for Pentagon Jr. in Phoenix and you get King Cuerno and Grundo, it's kind of like, I'm gonna wait on the flight until we can get the guys that kind of have that proven track record instead.
Is there? I guess is there a kind of a we've seen you grow. You've wanted to be kind of that PWG, but in your area in New England. Is it working? Are the people? Because I remember when you used to talk about some of the fans that come to Beyond Wrestling shows, almost kind of similar to PWG fans in that they come to Beyond Wrestling shows because it's fun and it's exciting and they get to have awesome food and it's a great environment. Doesn't necessarily mean they're like drumming. They're not the hardcore wrestling fans. Has that changed since you've been going to Fed?
Yeah, I don't think for a while, like, it was super flattering when people would say like Beyond Wrestling is the PWG the East Coast, because to me that meant, I mean, when I watch PWG, it's because they typically have most consistently high match quality of all of the independent wrestling promotions. But it got to a point for me where I was looking for more from professional wrestling as a creative outlet than just putting together really good matches. I'm fascinated by the stories, and I try and make sure that every story and every match, or every match has a story and that they're tied together in some way. And it's almost like I look at every show like a book, and each match is an individual chapter. And so that chapter may have a story that's self-contained to itself, but then when you put all of those stories together, it tells one big story. And then it's like, almost if you were to compare it, I mean, I don't read the Harry Potter series, but I know of it. But I assume that it's kind of like, there's like 7 or 8 books. And so like
7 books, 8 movies, and soon to be a play.
Okay, but what I'm saying is that, so throughout all of those books, there's an even bigger story that's being told. That's kind of how I look at Beyond Wrestling now. And Paul Crockett from PW Insider, who's been coming to a lot of our live events and doing awesome coverage, always points out that there is no other independent wrestling organization in the United States that is putting as much emphasis on the storytelling as Beyond Wrestling. And I really do pride myself in that. And I do think that that's one thing that still gets overlooked, but can distinguish us from organizations like AIW, AAW, or PWG. I'm not saying it's better or worse. I'm not trying to pick on them, but I know that there's a lot of fans that, I'm sure would rather see two super indie guys wrestle instead of like a Crusade for Change match. But when you look at the reactions that the Crusade for Change gets in front of our live crowd and the story that we've been telling with them over the past year, they've all grown as performers. And that goes back to what Beyond Wrestling's purpose is in the first place, is to try and help wrestlers develop. That way they're more than one dimensional. Look at AR Fox from what he started with Beyond Wrestling to how complete of a wrestler he is now. In terms of his presence in the ring, the way that he presents his character. It's more than just being a high-flying stunt show with him now. And I do think that a lot of it is because we put him in challenging situations that at times maybe he was in over his head, but he always found a way to get to the other side, and he's better off wrestler for it. So fans kind of need to know, hey, when I'm watching Beyond Wrestling, I'm watching the talent development process as well. And getting back to what you were saying about PWG is I mean, obviously PWG is at such a high level now that when a wrestler wrestles for PWG, it's like getting them to the next level in terms of their popularity. But I don't necessarily know that a place like PWG does more to develop somebody's actual ability. It's kind of like, you've made it to the dance at that point. And I still look at Beyond Wrestling as a way to help people develop so that they can get to places like that or earn more paid bookings or get on WWE's radar. So in terms of the fan base, since we've left Fet Music, we've had more sold out shows than we've ever had. And yes, some of the venues are smaller, but there's also this kind of sense that like fans know, like, hey, we can't wait, we can't risk it, we might get shut out. And I think that in turn is almost making Beyond Wrestling more popular. Like, it's a hotter commodity because there's the possibility of getting shut out. I can tell you right now that we are on course for a sellout at Americanrana 16. But obviously, running the biggest venue that we ever ran just a couple days ago in Melrose Memorial Hall, there was a ton of tickets left. So, we've done 4 shows at Arts at the Armory in Somerville since last September. We have sold out every single one of those shows. Of the 3 events that we've done at Aurora, we've sold out 2 of those 3 events. The third one came on Memorial Day weekend, which is one of those situations where it's tough to run because people are going to be going to parties and stuff like that. But because nobody else runs, you have access to more wrestlers that wouldn't normally be available because a lot of people don't run because they know they're going to take a hit at the gate. But because we have the access and the development of all of that footage, Tanya and her crew shooting it and editing it and getting it up fast, you kind of offset that loss because you put together a card that is compelling to people that want to buy the DVD or watch the footage after because it's featuring names that they know, like Big Damo or Jeff Cobb or Keith Lee. So the biggest thing that I think that we struggle with, and very rarely I think are you going to be able to find that overlap 100%, but the biggest thing is trying to balance the 2 audiences, the live crowd versus the DVD crowd or the Beyond Demand crowd, whatever you want to call them now. The people that are going to be there watching the show live versus the people that are going to be watching it after the fact, which is more so because they're interested in the more artistic elements of professional wrestling. They're interested in the performance. You can't go back and watch like a baseball game. You can't just go back and watch like a random baseball game from like 1995 and be like, okay, awesome. The same way that you can just like even pull up like a squash match from like an old episode of Superstars, and there's still going to be redeeming qualities to it. It's completely different. It's completely unique to professional wrestling. I myself still prefer being there live in person, and I think that the needs of that live audience are different than the needs of the DVD audience. So, the struggle is trying to put together lineups that appeal to both as best as you can.
Speaking of bringing those guys in, Matt Riddle, he's kind of a newcomer. You've had him on several shows and great matches with guys like Sugar Dunkerton, Tommaso Ciampa, and bringing in his friends like Chuck O'Neil, stuff like that. How do you think he's going to do in front of that PWG crowd?
It's hard to say because I can tell you right now that Riddle is somebody that people online like really go nuts over, but our fans were like resentful when we started using him, and it took a while for him to kind of like really settle in front of our crowd, if that makes sense, where our fans realize like, okay, this isn't just a traction guy, like this guy is actually pretty good. And it's kind of funny because that's where the storytelling elements of professional wrestling come in there. It's like, you can just throw out like a sick match, and if the guy has a good match, like that works for some guys. But other guys, like you kind of have to put a program around them and give them a series of matches with the same opponent and build a feud so that way the crowd can kind of understand their motives and how they act. And to me, Riddle's been one of those guys. And now it's like after 6 months of putting Riddle in a program with other MMA fighters or people in catch point and stuff like that, the way that it came out was like finally he was in a position where he could headline against Tommaso Ciampa, and it wasn't out of the ordinary. If we would have debuted Matt Riddle 6 months ago right in the main event, I think our fans would have completely turned on that. As far as how he's going to do in front of PWG, I think that Matt Riddle is a phenomenal performer when you consider his level of experience. So I can definitely see him going out there and having a strong outing and surpassing people's expectations. But I think it's going to be based on, we're watching a wrestler that hasn't even competed at a national level for 1 year, as opposed to somebody who wrestles at the level of Chris Hero, who's been around. If that makes any sense. You know what I mean? It's
It
like
does,
with Matt
yeah.
Riddle, like with Matt Riddle, people are like, oh, he's an unbelievable performer, with the caveat of considering how new he is. And based on how much he's improved as quickly as he has, he's probably going to be like the best wrestler like ever in like 3 years. But you know what I mean? Like, but to me, that's what I like watching though. I like watching that development. I like watching him as he gets better and better, or any of the wrestlers, as you can see. Wow, this is something that they didn't do last time that they absolutely nailed this time, and it just keeps getting better and better. So I do think that Riddle is good enough right now to be able to wow the PWG crowd, and it seems like very few wrestlers over the past 5 or 6 years have really shit the bed at PWG. So I don't expect Riddle to be on that short list.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm hoping to see some of the feedback from that. But yeah, it's interesting to see how you've booked him, and it was very good, smart, gradual booking. Um, Speaking of though, I think this is something that we've been tweeted at before. Keith Lee, man, you talk about a guy, his size with his kind of his charisma that's getting out there. How did that come about with you? I don't I don't know what the backstory is. That did you just happen to see him at a show and you're like, okay, I'm going to use him, or what happened with that?
Somebody on Twitter hit me up and was like, "Oh, Keith Lee wants to come work for you," and I was kind of like, okay." Like we get a lot of suggestions, but it just so I mean I wanted to put together gigantic as far as like a bunch of hoss fights. So timing wise, it was like, okay, this works, and it was the type of situation where because he knew he was unproven, like he worked out a deal. You know what I mean? It's like he if you're somebody that's unknown, it's hard to justify a flight and a full booking fee on top of that. Just speaking realistically, you know what I mean? Like if I'm gonna drop $750, I could bring in somebody that's a drive-in, that's a surefire draw. So for somebody that's gonna get a flight, like he was cool and he was willing to work with me, and obviously with our working relationship with Limitless Wrestling, we were able to get him another booking. So it's not like he lost money coming out for the weekend. It's probably not what he normally got, but it was almost like a tryout, like, hey, are you good enough to be at Beyond Wrestling? And he stole the show. You know what I mean? I felt bad for JT Don, Jeff Cobb, Chris Dickinson, and Big Damo because there was no following Donovan Dijak versus Keith Lee at Gigantic. And the thing was, Donovan Dijak steals every Beyond Wrestling show. So then it was kind of like, well, is Keith Lee a fluke? And he got over so much that the very next day I bought his flight from Texas to Boston, and I just felt like when you get over that much with our crowd, you can't not reward that. And with the match with John Silver, he proved himself not to be a fluke. That was another match. I mean, my dad turned to me and he was like, that was one of the best 5 matches that Beyond Wrestling has ever run. And to be there live for that atmosphere, to see some of the incredible displays of athleticism that they pulled off, it was just a wild thing You had to be there. I mean, it's good on tape. Don't get me wrong. The match holds up on tape. But to be there live was like a special, memorable experience. Those are the moments that make people say, I can't miss a Beyond Wrestling show. I have to go to every Beyond Wrestling show. And, once things fell through with some of the other people that I was looking to for Americanrana, whether it was, Zandig or Scorpio or Dan Severn, whatever the case may be, it was like, you know what? Like, this guy's on fire. Like, we got to bring him in for Americanrana. And, I even told him, I was like, hey, man, I want to work with you for Americanrana. What match ideas do you have? And Brian Cage has been trying to come back, and Keith Lee suggested it. And so just timing-wise, it's like, all right, like, if you want to wrestle Brian Cage, then we're going to bring in Brian Cage. And the Americanrana lineup is, like, so stacked that I feel like it's one of the matches that's getting overlooked. And as we were talking about Matthew Riddle, too, like, Riddle versus John Silver, like, with the year that John Silver's been having for us, like, that is a match that I'm most excited for that could just as easily steal the show. So, again, John Silver and Keith Lee are two guys that have just absolutely been killing it for us. But that's part of the freedom that Beyond Wrestling has, is that our fans know now that Beyond Wrestling usually doesn't screw up. So anytime that they're bringing in somebody new, it's worth giving them a chance. I mean, I remember when Speedball Mike Daly debuted against Biff Busick, and it's like this geeky-looking kid coming out in a karate gi, and, like, fans in the crowd are heckling him. And then it's like, all of a sudden, he kicks our hero, and it's like, holy shit, like, this kid is out of control. And it's like, he was a made man in front of our crowd in just one night. You need to reward that type of performance, and that's what we've done with Keith Lee.
I absolutely think you have. So yeah, before we got for Drew, I guess everything you said, I think, just sold all of our listeners on getting the show. Tickets are still on sale, I believe, at lookmanofans.com. Correct? There's very few left. So tell our listeners where they can get it, how they can get tickets, or where this is going to be when they can watch it.
Yeah, if you can just go to lookmandofans.com, you can get tickets for Americanrana 16. The VIP is sold out. We've got a handful of combo tickets for only $40, so you can see Women's Wrestling Revolution and Americanrana 16 for only $40 that day, which is a pretty good deal. And, the show will probably be up in like 1 or 2 days at the raw footage at Beyond Demand, and then it'll get a proper release probably within a month at Smart Mark Video. So I think Smart Mark Video usually does the Blu-ray for Americanrana as well, so that'll be cool. And might have a couple of surprises or two in store, but I mean, it's pretty straightforward. That's one thing that I like about Americanrana is sometimes in order for a card to stay relevant, you kind of have to stagger announcements and keep reminding people, like, hey, like, this is a show, so we're going to match one, then we're going to wait a couple days and announce match two. With Americanrana, I like just going, like, hey, I'm going to show you my entire hand. Like, these are all of the matches that we're running. And it's a very well-received card. Obviously, people still associate Beyond Wrestling with Fet Music more than any other venue. So for us to be able to go back there, I think that adds another element to it. To make it a more must-see show than if it was just this lineup in any other venue. So, like I said, we're projected for a sellout. Anybody that's looking to get tickets should not hesitate.
There you go. Well, thanks a lot, Drew. We appreciate you coming on and talking about it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, and thank you. Thanks.